Right. I get a firm remembering, understanding that if my higher power is love, it's unconditional in nature.
Yeah.
So what that means applied to this journey and this question of, am I at the right place at the right time? What that means is there's nothing I can do that's wrong, right? Whatever choices I make are my beautiful choices to make. And
Yeah.
there's nothing outside of me that will ever judge me wrong or right unless I give that thing the power to do so. Welcome, beautiful souls, to season 3 of the Cosmic Love Antenna with your host, Harrison Ma. I invite you on a mystical voyage from the intellect to the soul, delving deep into the mysteries of love's spiritual essence and its divine unfolding. This podcast celebrates the peeling back of heart layers, revealing beautiful, profound lessons, interviews with loving spiritual seekers, and practices and tools to open up your heart to love's infinite wisdom. I'm so excited to have you and grateful that our hearts have connected. Enjoy the show. Good evening, morning, afternoon, magical, heartfelt beings. Welcome back to the show and welcome back to another rebroadcast episode of the Cosmic Love Antenna, where today I had the beautiful pleasure to be interviewed, to be questioned, to be held in the space of another friend on another show. Today's case, I was with the powerful Mr. Mitchell on his awesome show, Back to the Present. And I say that with a capital A because you can really feel his big heart in this episode today and what he really brings to these conversations. And today's topic was on the topic of from head to heart, where I talked a lot about the vulnerability of standing in your source, standing in your strength, talking about concepts of faith and conscious love, acknowledging our emotions in this present moment, creating love through conscious connection and meaningful connections, as well as holism and a lot more juicy goodness. Enjoy this chat today. If you get so much out of it, please go check out Mitchell and his beautiful platform. But regardless, tune in, tap in, and enjoy the downloads.
On today's episode of the podcast, we have Harrison Ma. Harrison is an author, mentor, and spiritual love coach. Welcome, Harrison. How's life?
Thank you for having me, Mitchell. Life is beautiful at the moment. We were just chatting before we started recording. We're both in Australia. It's morning time for us, and life at the moment it's very expansive, and I feel it most in the mornings because my spiritual channel is most open. So I'm feeling abundant, my friend.
Excellent. Lovely to hear. The explanation I gave was obviously very short. So if you could just expand on that a little bit more, for everybody, really, just an explanation as to sort of how you got where you are at the moment, what you're doing with yourself nowadays, please, Harrison.
Yeah, I'd love to. So where I find myself in the world at the moment is I spend most of my time as a reflection of my own journey, helping others. So what I mean by that is I help individuals as a spiritual love coach walk from the head into their heart. It's probably the simplest way to say it. And I've found most of the ways that I do that come from a spiritual lens. So helping people remember their power, their gifts, their love that they're meant to give to the world. And I sort of stood in that and stepped into that and found myself in that world because I was asking myself the same questions, right? As a little boy that was born in Australia, I was very sensitive and emotional and had all these things moving through me. And then through a series of events, I suppressed a lot of that. Went into my adolescence, I had some pain and trauma come up. And then in my late teens, early adulthood, I had some beautiful pain teachers come in to awaken my sensitivities and my gifts. And long story cut short, now I sort of stand in that loving power and help people do the same.
Nice, man. Short and sweet. My first question is in regards to a spiritual love coach.
Mm,
But maybe before we touch on that a little bit more, because I'm always interested in this, and you can share however much you want to share. But what did that pain teacher look like for you? Because
mm,
no doubt lots of people that are familiar with those words have had their experiences, and
yeah,
maybe they're also um, looking to looking to see if that is there and they're unaware of it at this point.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
find examples, real world examples, always help people.
yeah. Me too. Thank you for asking. So, I mean, to be honest, I've had many, as most people have, but what I've learned to do along my path as I speak more about my life, I've learned to open my heart and tune into the ones that, one, impacted me the most, and two, as you just beautifully highlighted, the ones that resonate with others most, right? To help them, right? Because our stories are how we connect and bond. So three come to mind. As a child, as I alluded to a second ago, as a man in this incarnation, I grew up in a society that told me as a boy it was very unmanly to express his sensitivities, his emotionality, his beautiful feminine side. So a lot of little traumas and limiting beliefs and pains came into my world that I made the decision around to suppress myself and push away big parts of my being.
Mm.
Then fast forward to my adolescence, I was sexually abused and went through a trauma around that, which upon reflection was very much connected to a lot of the things I was suppressing.
Mhm.
And then in my early adolescence into my middle 20s, I went through a pain teacher of being detained and deported and jailed and then sent back to Australia after many years of traveling abroad. And the combination of those three pain teachers has been a big awakening moment in itself for me as an adult now.
Thanks, Harrison. I appreciate your honesty. We've all got our own pain teachers, as you said, and um, sort of regardless of what they are, it's very much how they affect us at a deeper level that tends to contribute to how it affects the rest of our life.
Yep.
And then the courage, as you would know, to do something about it if and when we're ready, because they are often challenging circumstances for a reason, and almost always they're not friggin' easy to deal with. And that's why it can take a lifetime or more to work with those things. So, no doubt you're probably going to answer this in part of some of these talking points that I've noted down, and I feel like I said before, where I wanted to get started was um, as a spiritual love coach. I imagine, like most coaches, you're teaching others sort of the things that you've acquired over time and the knowledge and the wisdom, but also through the life experiences you have. And some of those are kind of come from those pretty big pain teachers that you've mentioned. So, yeah, if you could touch on that spiritual love coach aspect a little bit more, and then we can dive a bit deeper, please.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, as I described at the start of this chat, the simple description of what that means to be a spiritual love coach, how I've defined it is, traveling from the head to the heart and spending more time in that heart space and asking oneself, what does it actually mean? Right? What does it mean to step into the situations in your life from the space of the heart versus the space of the head and the mind? Because let's be honest, I mean, I'll use me as an example. I'm stepping into most of my interactions in the world from my mind, right? From my belief systems, from my negative thinking, from my stories, from the programs, from all of the things that have been taught to me. And I'm not here to say that the mind and our thinking and our thoughts are bad. We need them. They're part of our existence. But what I'm bringing to the table is there is another way of being. And that way of being is expressing oneself from the heart. Okay, so if I understand that, what does that look like? Well, one example that comes up in this moment is going back to my experience, my journey. It's stepping forward in all of your vulnerabilities, right? It's stepping forward in all of your emotionality. It's stepping forward in the beautiful sensitivities that make you powerful, not weak, right? So that's really, one of the biggest things I get to walk people home to.
Yep. Yeah, there's a few things that come up there. I mean, it's with good reason. It's not easy to step into those sensitivities because there's a lot going on there, and I imagine that that's why you're doing this coaching work is
Yeah.
because it can't be
Complicated.
explained. Yeah, it's complicated. It can't be explained, and it can't be explained and worked through in a podcast or even in a short conversation or session or something like that. Because I mean, for one, everybody's different. But I suppose from your experience, those sensitivities that you're talking about that you're helping people remember and see the power in.
Mm.
What are some common beliefs and threads that you find in the people that you work with that contribute to their fear of these sensitivities, whatever they are?
Ooh, good question. I mean, so many, but the two that drop in this moment is the fear of abandonment and the fear of rejection,
Yeah, true.
right? If I show myself fully, if I open my heart fully in this moment with this lover, with this friend, with this family member, if I do the thing, I will be rejected. If I do the thing, I will be abandoned. And, we could go off in a whole conversation about inner child healing, and that's a big tool to apply to this challenge and this pain. But I just want people listening, just the awareness of that pain in itself can help you to start to bring conscious awareness to it to change it, right?
Yeah, for sure. I know you like to use yourself as an example on your podcast, and it's hard not to do it. But like the fear and the pain that you talk about, it's usually pretty strong. But there is some serious power in firstly recognizing it and becoming aware of it, and then I've found not wanting to change it, not necessarily not wanting to do something about it or with it, but just not wanting to change it for the sake of changing it. Because once upon a time, I was very good at. No, sorry, I would have started at not being good at being aware of it, but knowing that I was still running from it.
Yeah.
And then, becoming pretty good at being aware of it, but also pretty bloody good at running from it. And it's just funny because not until I went through those processes and still go through those processes was I able to be aware of it and not run from it, which might seem easy because you feel like it's like it actually takes more effort to run from it than to not. But for whatever reason, it's also scary as shit to sit with those things. And like you said, abandonment and rejection. I mean, I could are common themes in most things, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like they're hard ones not to see in most people for reason.
Well, I just want to speak to that feeling of running away, of wanting to run away. And, what you're describing is a symptom of what I spoke about earlier of approaching life from the mind, from the ego structure.
Yeah.
Right. The thing that wants us to run away is something in the ego mind, right? Whether it's in a child, whether it's a mother wound, father wound, ancestral, whatever it is, we could go into the analysis of it. But at this point I want to make here is if we, in that moment that fear comes up of wanting to run away, instead of looking at it from the mind that is in that fear response, we take a moment to drop into the heart and we look at that same component that we're wanting to move through, suddenly we don't want to run away. Suddenly we just want to be there with it, right? Because that's the third option, right? The third option is, instead of running away, instead of ignoring and suppressing, we can just be there with it. We can just sit in it.
Yeah, for sure. Harrison, let's maybe touch on that a little bit, because I know for myself a few years ago, it was, when I grew up, my teachers and lots of people around me always told me I was a thinker, right? And I bought into that. I am a thinker. Everyone's a thinker, right? But whatever, for whatever reason, I bought into that. And because I thought into that and bought into that, my thinking drove my thinking, and I'm really good at it. Don't get me wrong. But the point of me saying that is because when I started to think of and learn about the heart itself in the context that you're talking about, it was very hard for me to understand that concept, because I was thinking with my mind.
Yes.
Therein lies a bit of a conundrum.
Paradox.
Yes, it's a paradox, no doubt. So for people some people are going to be aware of it and some people aren't, and it doesn't really matter. But from your perspective, in regards to what you're talking about with the heart, what can you just touch on that a little bit more? Because I know you likely share the same belief in they both serve a purpose and they're both equally is important for another, but they are distinct, and maybe some explanations on those distinctions, please.
Well, again, this is what my said it a second ago. This is why I spend big amounts of time with people coaching, and why I have a podcast now of almost 180 episodes around this topic, because, as soon as we step into the heart, we open up to, in my opinion, the greater reality of what we are. So there's so much to it, but let's make it simple. The first, piece here I'd offer everyone listening to start to distinguish between thinking and what the heart provides is to realize that thinking is just one of the 4 ways that we approach information within our consciousness, right? I would encourage people to look up, I think Jung speaks about the 4 ways of information processing: thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting, right? You just spoke about one of them, right? Thinking. And you're so right, myself included here in this. We grow up in a world where we're only educated to be thinking beings. We have no understanding around sensing, feeling, and intuiting. So just for people new to this, it's about opening your awareness to and having curiosity around, okay, so there's these other areas of my consciousness awareness. Okay, so what are they? One of the ways I help people begin this journey is putting their hands in their heart, closing their eyes, and just feeling their hands on their chest, or feeling their heartbeat, or feeling the space around their body, right? Just that in itself, just that little practice can start to bring awareness to your ability to be more than a thinking animal.
Mm-hmm. Nice, man. Nice explanation. And it's a simple one, and the simple ones are always powerful, because it's important not to remember that it doesn't have to be as complex as it may seem, because our thinking mind can't understand it. So why not just take it back to basics, which is what you just explained, and just simply put your hands on your heart and see, and be curious enough to see to see what happens after you do that.
And let me add one more thing to this, Mitchell, because this has also helped me, and this is a simple understanding too, and it's more of a spiritual one, but I feel you, and I feel your audience will be able to resonate with this. We aren't just beautiful human thinking animals, right? We are also a powerful spiritual being that exists inside of us, and I would assert it mostly exists in that heart space. But I just want everyone to hold this little thought experiment in their awareness. Your thinking mind is mostly connected to you as the individual and what you intellectually have known and educated yourself on. Beautiful. But there is also simultaneously within you an infinite amount of deep knowing that is far beyond what your individual human experience has picked up in this lifetime. So what I'm saying here is it's okay to not know how to do the thing. It's okay to not know from your intellectual mind perspective. Like you're listening to me speak right now, and there might be parts of you that are saying, okay, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to feel my heart. I don't know how to sense my intuition. I don't know how to do all these things that he's saying. What I'm telling you is it's okay. It's okay for that mind not to know, but there is a part of you that does know. And this is where faith and trust comes in.
Yeah, I appreciate you adding that on, because I do think it's relevant. Because again, it's one of those other things that I've come across in the last few years. That faith is, it's often having faith in something that is unknown, and like not, it's sort of something that you can't think of, and often it's, for me anyway, it's often something that I don't even understand.
Yep.
And it's again coming back to that, using as a thinker,
Yeah.
it's freaking hard having faith
Yeah.
in something that I don't understand, because it's, for most of my life it's not been that way. It's been more a matter of trying to have control. Yeah, exactly. So I was going to say control over things and that led me to believing that my power was controlling things, which, as you can imagine, is a hard lesson to learn, because that's not the case at all. But it was, it was great. I'm glad I learned the lesson, because it was an important one for me. I know this is not necessarily always an easy question, or is an easy topic to discuss, because it's somewhat broad, and again, it's something that I believe can't always necessarily be perfectly explained in words. But the concept of love, what does it mean to you?
Another very deep and big question,
Sorry.
because basically what you asked me just now is, what does God mean to you? Because that's my answer. The shortest version is, I have come into a remembering that love is so much more than an emotion and a feeling. To me, it's, we were speaking a second ago to the surrendering and having faith and trust in the knowing that is more than the mind. Well, the thing that I'm surrendering and having trust in is the higher power of love that exists inside of me. So love, to put simply, is a higher power consciousness state that we can all start to fall back into and unlock deeper layers of within us.
Yeah, it's a great topic. Oh man, that was probably the best short answer I think I've ever received.
I was impressed with myself as I heard. I was
Yeah,
like, oh yeah, good job.
You pat yourself on the back. It was great. What for lack of a better word, practices do you like to use in events? Well, not necessarily in events, but just to remind yourself of that that feeling, that explanation you've just given.
Yeah. So the one I gave earlier is a good way to begin for beginners, right? The feeling, putting your hands on your heart and feeling your heartbeat and feeling the field around you and picturing your heart. I do that all the time.
Yep.
Another one that we spoke to earlier as well, we alluded to it, but I'll explain it in more depth here now, is when I'm moving through something difficult, when I'm moving through something painful, Like yesterday, for example, I had a lot of, limiting beliefs coming up around my business and unworthiness and value and all the things.
Mhm.
And one of the ways I tap into that consciousness of love is not by suppressing, not by spiritually bypassing, but feeling the feelings from a state of not need, as you said, not needing anything to change in that moment. I refer to it as holding the child, right?
Mm.
Holding yourself in an unconditional consciousness state where you don't expect yourself to be anything,
Yeah.
right? You're just being here in the moment with everything that's moving through you, the positive and the negative, and holding yourself. So,
Mm.
for me, again, what that looks like is not just feeling the feelings, but not expecting it and pushing it and pretending that it needs to be anything else. That usually unlocks me. And then the last tip I would give, the practice that unlocks this, is something that's happening right now, is allowing myself to be held in someone else's field. And what I mean by that is
Mm.
opening my heart to a connection that I have with someone, a friend, family member, a lover. And in the same way that I approach those inner aspects of myself, now allowing my whole being in the field of someone else to be myself fully, right? Not pretending, not pushing, not forcing, not putting on any sort of mask and persona, just
Yeah.
flowing with whatever's moving through me.
Nice, man. I am familiar with the first two. Some people might not, but I'd like to, that third one that you just mentioned, that's something I'm aware of and have only really started to come to terms of probably in the last
Mm.
12 months. And what I mean by that is, I was actually sharing this with a friend yesterday. I'm I would class myself as an introvert,
Mm.
maybe an extroverted introvert. Um, that seems to change, no doubt, for a number of reasons. But once upon a time, I used to think, like, because I like being by myself, I used to think that that's what I needed when, say, I needed to be picked up, or
Mm.
when I was feeling like lonely. It's like when I felt lonely or unworthy and all these other types of things that we're sort of touching on. I used to think that I needed to then be by myself to pick myself back up again. And I do think that that sometimes is the case. However,
Mm.
of late, I've realized that is not what I need most of the time.
Mm.
But I've told myself for whatever reason that it is, and starting to have that recognition of that fact, and then realizing, hey, like, so say when I have that feeling, I'm like, all right, hold on a second. Is that really, is that really what I need right now? And sometimes, don't get me wrong, it is, because the thought of anything else that just doesn't feel right. But then other times I'm like, oh, hold on a second. No, 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 no.
Yeah.
You're doing that retreat thing where you think
Yep.
you're telling yourself that you need to be by yourself, but you actually need to be
Yep.
with others, which I believe is similar to what you've suggested
Yes.
at the end. Um, do you can you speak more on that? Like, is
Yeah.
that, and not necessarily my example? I imagine this is somewhat common for a lot of people. And again, I try not to. I'm not judging others, but I mean, maybe sometimes when other people have that, they then choose to drink or numb out,
Yeah.
whatever way it is, like TV, whatever it ends up being. Um, is that, yeah, is that hidden?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of angles we could take this from, but I'll just be an example of what I shared before and just flow in this moment. It's it's not an or conversation, right? It's not a I need to be by myself or I need to have someone else here to be in my space for me to feel good. It's not or, it's and.
Mm,
I do well by myself, connecting in, and I also need other people to be in their field of, to help me remember what I am when I often get lost.
Yeah.
Right. It's the way that I explain this is from two different perspectives. Firstly, at the deepest of levels, if we understand that our deeper consciousness is love, like we just talked about a second ago,
Mm-hmm.
then the next question we could ask is, okay, so if I'm love, what am I doing here? Well, in many ways, in my opinion, it's for that same love to experience love in all the ways, in other people, in the world, in interactions, right? So in my opinion, one of your reasons for being is to experience the flow of love, not just the flow of love within you, but the flow of love in interactions within the world with other people, right?
Yeah.
So, but then the other way of sort of helping people understand why it's needed to be in the field of others from time to time is we get stuck in our shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
We get stuck. We just spoke about the mind and the ego earlier. Often that mind and the ego is holding all of these beliefs and personas and archetypes, I would call them, that we get lost in. We become them, right? I become the victim of abandonment. I become the victim of not enoughness. I become the mask of, whatever the pain of anger or the pain of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
When we are in the field of another, whether they're conscious of it or not, their love wakes us up to our love. Their love field wakes us up to what we are beyond that current pain.
Whew, that's a nice one, man. That's I as soon as you said that, it made a lot of sense because I couldn't help but think when we are, say, touching on what we've been speaking about, like when we are in that state, there's often people that we do want to be around, that have that. Well, the way I've thought of it is like they have an energy about them, and you know very strongly what that energy is, and so it's like, oh, okay. Like my brother's an example. If I know when I'm around him, I just feel good. Like he's got a good energy about him. We get along. We're best mates. It's easy. So yeah, like you said, but realizing that love field is going to almost reignite the love
Yes.
field that we already have
Yes.
feels feels super important because it's not like we even have to do anything.
No.
It's
No.
already there, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. And this is, again, when you started this podcast by asking me, what is a spiritual love coach? This is another answer to it, right? It's remembering this consciousness of love that we are in all of the ways, right? The example that we're giving is, around people and interacting with people. And it's never going to be a doing of something. It's never going to be a gaining. You being in your brother's field is not you gaining your love by being around him. It's you just releasing and surrendering into his field that beautifully allows you to surrender and allow yourself to accept your field, right?
Yeah.
Your field of love.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well said. It is exactly that.
Yeah.
And with other people, with partners and parents and stuff like that. Even if sometimes that parents can trigger you, which is a good thing in my opinion, but there's also just being around them
Yes.
just feels homely, and is exactly what you're talking about, really, isn't it? Even though they
Yeah.
we know that being around them could trigger us for whatever reason and whatnot. There's an aura about that environment that very much feels like love, which is exactly
Yeah.
what you said.
Yeah. And if you like, just to put these 2 points together, because you mentioned trigger, if you practice in that moment, so let's get very specific and granular, just so this is clear for everyone. Let's say in my book, I gave this example, being around my beautiful dad, as most of us probably experience. My dad beautifully triggers me, right?
Yeah.
And in that moment of being triggered, I have a couple options, right? I can suppress it, ignore it. I can project it onto him, Or I can apply the practice we spoke about earlier in that moment with my dad, feeling the trigger. I could just be with the trigger, let
Mm.
it be there in me, observe it, feel it, acknowledge it, hold it.
Yep.
And what happens in that moment, if I can do that, that trigger becomes a gateway back to that love energy that we just talked about. So I don't become the anger, I don't become the wound for the rest of the evening. I hold myself, feel it, and come back to that love energy that's always there.
Yeah, and thinking about what you just said, um, in the instances where I've practiced that in the last few years, and it's funny because it's not funny, but kind of funny. But where you said there, where when I've done that, and I haven't thought about it in those exact terms, it's actually allowed me um, to love that person and accept them a lot easier. Like it just, as soon as you do it, don't you? It's just like, oh, really? It's like, it just seems so easy, but you just, when you sit there and allow it, you're like, oh, hold on a second. And you realize really quickly that the thing that triggered you, you don't care about
Yes.
at all. And you're like, that doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
Like literally at all. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
cool. How good's that? Like, but it's actually also funny that you say that, because the next thing I wanted to ask you about was as a Carl Jung quote, which I know you're familiar with, and I know other people are familiar with, but I mean, I love it, and so I'd like to just
Mhm.
touch on it, and that is, what you resist persists,
Yeah.
which is pretty heavily aligned with triggers and things like that,
Yeah.
that we just mentioned. So, what's your opinion on that, Harrison?
So much on this one.
I
And
know.
Carl Jung is a just to meet your excitement with more excitement. Like he's a endless pit of motivation and beautiful little gems like this one.
Yeah.
To me, what this brings up is deal with it, right? Deal with it in the moment that it arises.
Mhm.
Right. So let's use the example that we've already given, right? With me and my beautiful father and the anger that comes up. If I don't if I don't meet it, greet it, feel it, and move through it in that moment, it will come back. It will
Mhm.
come back either as the same anger and the same trigger,
Yeah.
or it'll come up with a different face, but the same foundation.
Yeah.
And I just want to sprinkle this in here for all the sort of somatic and physical therapists out there in the world, or people that are working on the physical body. This is, in my opinion, what leads to so much chronic disease and chronic ailment in the world. It's not the toxins in the world. It's not the injuries and the all these things on the physical layer. They play a role, don't get me wrong, but I feel the deeper roots of all chronic physical disease and challenge is the suppression of these energetic responses, right? These emotional responses, right? Another way to say it more simply, emotion is energy in motion. When we make the choice in that moment to ignore that anger emotion, that energy doesn't dissipate, it doesn't go away. It will get our attention in another way,
Yeah.
right? It'll get our attention again, either in the same trigger another time or across our physical spectrum, right? Through a physical response.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I fully agree with everything you've said. What I've also noticed is suppressing those emotions. It it almost exacerbates physical pain. Like it could be,
100%.
it could already be physical pain that's there, and I think that the reason the physical pain is there could also already be
Yes.
attached to this emotion, and
Yep.
then yeah, even though it might not be the same thing that's happened, if it's the same energy in motion or
Yes.
lack of motion, it exacerbates this already existing physical pain, doesn't it?
Yep. Yep.
Um, and it can be a hard one to get our heads around, because I suppose it's like a lot of the things that we're touching on. It's kind of having the realization that um, that this, say for example, physical pain is aligned with our suppression of an emotion
Yes.
that
Yes.
we already don't really, we may not even know what that is, and even if we know what it is a little bit, we also kind of don't want to deal with it. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like you kind of find yourself into this position where you're like you're thinking about it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, hold on a second, maybe that is this suppression, tension, but you already didn't want to deal with it, and now it's there. Now it's in the physical form. And then you're really like, oh, it's like it becomes a little bit stuck, and it's not easy. None of these things that we're talking about are easy. What I have noticed, though, for myself is one, it's not suppressing or not dealing with the emotion tied to the physical pain. But I have noticed that even just sitting with the physical pain helps go back the other way,
Yes.
the emotional pain. So yeah,
Yes.
definitely the dealing with the emotion helps with the physical. But I've also noticed that just sitting with that physicalness goes back the other way.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons I love yoga so much. Right. It's one of the reasons I teach and practice yin yoga. And for people that don't know what yin yoga is, it's yoga, but you hold poses for longer periods of time. And
Yeah,
when you hold a yoga pose for a 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, you'll notice that you'll start to get emotional, right? You'll start to feel things. And why is that the case? It's what's exactly what you're saying. When you expand and open and bring tension and awareness to a specific part of your physical being, your tissues hold your issues. So when you expand the tissues, if there is a suppressed emotion, story, pain, trauma, etc., for most of us there is,
yeah,
you've suddenly given it the space to move.
yeah,
So you're 100%. It goes both ways.
yeah. Thanks, man. I actually haven't thought of it like that. I like yoga. I don't do it as much as I used to. But I've always, probably because I'm pretty active. I've always gravitated toward yin yoga.
Yeah.
Um, because it's
Feminine.
yeah, it's feminine, and it's an opportunity for me to do exactly that, because the other activities that I do um, are a little bit more
Yeah. Masculine.
masculine energy
Yeah.
uh, expenditure. And I also think it's really important because I mean I know a lot of people do believe this, but it's also just for me anyway. It's always important to highlight that all these things, none takes precedence over the other. The physical, the emotional, the mental, spiritual, and all that kind of stuff. That there's people that specifically teach some things, and I always find, for me anyway, the value is in the teacher, even if it's a teacher that focuses on one of those things. It's the teacher that encompasses everything, that I find anyway.
Yeah.
Um, Feels more, maybe it just feels more aligned to me, but I certainly believe that is the
Yeah.
best way of going about things.
Well, you're speaking about holism, right?
Yes.
What you're describing is, and I'm very grateful because I'm seeing you're not alone in your appreciation for people that sit in that lens. We're shifting into that and I feel, I know it's a remembering, because we've grown up in a society that teaches us in so many ways that we are isolated, segmented machines that need to be treated through symptoms through these different lenses to be fixed.
Yeah.
And that could not be further from the truth, right? Again, a lot in my teachings, I express that we are a beautiful system of systems that is holistically integrating and moving throughout time and space
Mm.
all together, right? So yes, we are mind, body, and spirit, but mind, body, and spirit doesn't see that segmentation, right? It just expresses itself in this moment in the highest need of the time.
Yeah. So true. Thanks. And I agree. I don't know why. It's funny how like what you just said there with treating symptoms and things like that. That's pretty common these days and seems to be the norm, and it sort of is what it is. It's strange. I don't feel like that. I mean, no one probably really knows, but I don't feel we have that pretty deep understanding that probably wasn't always the case. But for whatever reason, sometimes I get a little caught in thinking like, why? Like, why does it have to be this way when we know there's a different way of doing things that is so powerful, and of those that us that truly believe in it, we know that it works as well. So it's like, oh, these other things, these other alternate options are actually quite easy. They're not always easy, but they can be easy,
And they work,
and they work.
right?
They work, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't want to take your episode here into all things conspiracy and down that path, but let's just keep it simple. How I would answer that question of why. Well, it's because money, right? It's
Yeah.
power and control, right?
Mm.
It's very easy to earn money from a society that thinks it's separate, that thinks it's isolated, that thinks it's its symptoms, that thinks it's, all these external, again, isolated, segmented parts. There are a lot of mechanics in the world that are designed around this isolated, segmented view.
Mm.
And we have known the real answer. We have known the holism perspective for a very long time. But unfortunately, again, without going off into all the weeds, we are indoctrinated from a very young age as children to, like I said in my story, right? I suppressed my sensitivities and my powers and my gifts. One of the reasons for that is because there is this huge system that wants that to be so, right?
Yeah. I realize this could get off on a tangent, but I mean, I agree with what you're saying. And the few thoughts that come to mind were like, one, if there was no money involved, these treatment options that we're talking about probably wouldn't exist. So if you think of it like that, then it furthers the explanation that you've just given. And then the other one that I'm always interested in, and again, this is a bit of a rabbit hole here, but is it just interests me when and where and why money in itself became this powerful friggin' entity where it's just like once upon a time it didn't exist, right? And there was
Yeah.
trade and well, once upon a time there was no trade and it was just small little communities and stuff like that. And then eventually there was trade and then eventually there was money, and then money was associated to power and
Yeah.
success and all that kind of stuff. It's so interesting to think that we kind of had it all already thousands
Yes.
of years ago.
Yes.
And then maybe I'm answering this question in the sense that
You,
we sort of just forgot, and then
yes.
we started to money come into the picture, and then everyone's associated it with something that it's not really.
Correct.
And then now it's like we've come back full circle and people are remembering that, hey, like as the amount of money that you have and the shit that you got in your house means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we still chase it, for lack of a better word. We need it. We all, unfortunately,
Yeah.
kind of need it, don't we? So
Yeah.
I'm not talking bad about it per se. I just think it's super interesting how this circle of money is just it's fascinating, really.
Yeah. I mean, you answered it in your beautiful expression there. It's money's not the problem. It's the stories and the beliefs we've attached to it, right?
Mm.
It's that money equals power, money equals control, money equals, I'm going to be enough. Money is going to equal I'm valuable and worthy, right?
Yeah,
But money is just another expression of abundance, and abundance is in us already. We're already abundant. We're already full and worthy and valuable and enough. But again, this going full circle here back to what we spoke about at the start of this chat. This, in my opinion, is a symptom of a society that's stuck in their mind, stuck in their ego, right?
yeah,
They think that if they get X amount of dollars in their bank account, then they will be worthy, then they will be loved, then they will be enough, all the things. But if they simply took a moment to drop into their heart, to remember that they never needed all those things to have that status, then suddenly there wouldn't be a problem, right? I truly believe if all of the world leaders in the world did that shift this would change overnight.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And a part of me, I agree with what you're saying. And a part of me thinks for whatever stupid, strange reason, I mean, that's very unlikely that's going to happen. And also, part of me thinks it's like it's happening as it needs to happen and can't happen that way overnight in that one shift because it's so much, there's some type of collective lesson that maybe we're not even really aware of yet. I don't really know. I feel like there's definitely a through podcasts and um, through the internet and cultures being able to communicate in ways that we've never ever been able to do that. It definitely feels like there's a change on the horizon for the better, which is, I mean, I feel like I already can kind of feel it and sense it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, again, you said it. It's let's use the podcast movement as an example, right? Just your show and my show are beautiful examples of we don't need to break the system. We just need to make our own system. We just need to go over there and live these values that we're talking about, embody them, and we'll create what we want to see, rather than, because this is another fallacy. This is another problem. We think we need to attack the thing that we want to be gone for it to be a better life. Right? And that's the same energy. That attack, that awareness on the bad thing, that's the same consciousness that bad thing is created from. So let's let that thing do its stuff, and we'll go over here in our love energy and our love consciousness, and we'll create the world that we actually want to be in.
Yeah, fully agree, man. Thanks for saying that. It's so true. It's the answer is not trying to, if you've got a skin ailment, you don't rectify the eczema by cutting it, like your skin off, like it just, I'm sorry to use that analogy. I don't know why they use that, but like it's just, and when you think of it like that, it's just, it makes sense, doesn't it? But like, and look, unfortunately, some people are going about it a different way, and it is what it is, whatever. But I appreciate you saying that because it's so true. It's very much a matter of trying to do exactly what you said and lead by example and show people that there is this other way that doesn't have to be so violent or whatever it ends up being, for lack of a better word.
I'm really a big fan of Kelly Brogan. I'm sure you are aware of her work, and I'm just consuming a lot of her podcasts and her content at the moment. And she refers to that act of, looking at the thing that we don't want. Let's use the example of all these systems in the world, looking at that thing that we don't want and giving all our energy to it. She refers to it as the erotic caress of the enemy. And what she means by that is when we are applying so much of our consciousness and awareness to the thing that we don't want to expand in the world, it's in a way another way that we overlook and suppress our actual needs, right? We're overlooking our actual, it's an addiction in a way, right?
Yeah, man, it's so true. And it's like any addiction, I suppose. It's not necessary. It's a built around a bit of a habit, and they're not easy things to break. But I mean, if once we become aware of it, then it's our opportunity and our choice at the end of the day to do something about it. If we want to do it, if we don't want to do it, then all respect to you. That's everyone's got a different path, of course. Which leads me to authenticity. Again, all these words that I'm using have a lot of different meaning for a lot of different people's, but I would appreciate your opinion on it because I've listened to a number of your podcasts, and when someone's being authentic, you just know. It's actually very, very easy to recognize it. Maybe I'm thought about it. Maybe it's because when you maybe not authentic in yourself, you recognize people that aren't authentic, and then you have to realize that and embody that to then realize yourself when you're being authentic and other people that are authentic. Not really sure, but your take on authenticity, Harrison.
Yeah. So to me, and I am by far imperfect at this, but I always try my best to stand in this definition and embody what it means to me. To me, it's being fully yourself in any given moment, right? Being fully your current expression, your current story, your current deepest fullness. And in many ways, what that means is we spoke earlier about that field of love energy that we can feel from other people. It's that, right? It's doing our best in any given moment to not put on a mask, not put on, right? I'll give an example, right? Right now, here in this conversation with you, right? It would be very easy for me to put on the mask of the coach, or put on the mask of the teacher, or put on the mask of the person that's being interviewed, and act a certain way based off what I think those things should be. Or I could just be present and, again, flow with what is currently moving through me and wants to be expressed, right? That is being authentic and asking ourselves in all of our interactions, okay, what needs to be done for me to do that? Because, again, we're not perfect. We all have our current belief systems, our pain, our triggers that come up. And if we become those triggers, or we suppress those aspects, then they now become a challenge to being authentic. So it's about moving through it to come back to what we are in the moment.
Yeah, nice. Again, speaking from my own experience, it's something I've struggled with for a long time. Most of my life, for sure, was being authentic. I had still have a wide range of friends, and more particularly when I was younger, because it was very much a matter of just trying to fit in and feel worthy and all that kind of stuff that no doubt most people go through. And a lot of that for me was actually not even really knowing who I was, which is a tricky one, because when you don't know who you are, it's bloody hard to know. Like, you're trying to fit into all these people, and you don't even know who you're actually trying to fit in.
Yeah.
You don't even know what the frig you're doing with yourself. Anyway, it's
that's important, Mitchell. That's a very important point that you're saying, because we all ask that question.
Yeah.
And how I would respond to it is, you don't need to intellectually know, right? There's not an intellectual answer to that question.
Yeah.
That is going to bring you back to that authentic state that you want to be. The only answer to that question, in my opinion, is whatever is moving through you right now in this moment, right? That's the answer. Because, and let me just say it from this angle, but one of the practical ways that I do that personally is asking myself the question, what would be expressed in this moment if I didn't hold that belief, or I didn't hold that story, or I didn't hold that pain, or I didn't hold that current wound that's coming up? What would come through me? And that's how we get to that expression. That's all we ever have to do.
I appreciate the extra explanation, because it hits home. Obviously, and I imagine it hits home for other people, because it's just so easy to forget that we don't need to be anything other than ourselves. Unfortunately, again, we think we need to be a certain way to do X, Y, and Z and to please other people, but really all we want to do, and like that's even people the other way around, all we actually want people to do is just be themselves. We don't want anyone to be anything different, because we kind of, and I know that people that I grew up with and things like that, I know they knew when I wasn't being me anyway. So I was like, why when you think about it, like why was I doing those things? It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Well, the answer is, in my experience, going back to those fears. We don't want to be rejected. We don't want to be abandoned.
Yeah.
Right? We all have them, but it's, this is a practice in itself. I'll share this because I feel it will help people because this resonates. This resonates with me, what you're describing, so it'll resonate with everyone. When we are vulnerable, right, it's exactly what you're saying. We cut through the shit
Yeah.
and we get to what we actually are.
Yeah.
But we also do something else very special, is we also show that person that we're being vulnerable with an example of what it looks like, right? We actually inspire them.
Yeah.
Right? Because this is so important for people to understand. Not only when we are vulnerable do we not get rejected, do we not get abandoned, but we actually help others, right? We help people by showing them or helping them remember that by just being open in that moment, by just being sensitive, by just being vulnerable, that is a way that they can do the same.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? I love that. Vulnerability inspires.
Yeah.
That's what I wrote down.
Yeah.
How cool is that? It's so true, isn't it? And all it really requires is like, or in the instance of two people, I suppose it just requires one person to be vulnerable to inspire the other.
Yeah.
And then as a collective, then it requires a few extra people. But if you believe that vulnerability inspires, and it's an easy one to believe in the context of two people, if you just multiply that by the number of people and then divide it by half, like if half the population was vulnerable, then technically the other half should become inspired. Or maybe it doesn't even, maybe the vulnerability of one person, and I think this is probably the case, has the power to inspire. I don't know if it's necessarily dependent on how vulnerable you are or what you share, but it can definitely, I feel, inspire more than one, in the room or whatever it ends up being.
It's 100% that. And I'll give an example that everyone will have at least some familiarity with. I'm a big fan at the moment, at least, of talent shows, especially of America's Got Talent. I'm sure you're aware of it, my friend.
Yeah.
And I watch it for one of the reasons I watch it is to observe this phenomena that you're speaking about of people that get up on stage and yes, they have a talent and they're expressing themselves. But I noticed that the contestants that are the most popular, the most engaging, the most attention the most attention drawn to them are the contestants that are vulnerable. They express their emotions, they express their pains, they express their hero's journey from cancer or heartbreak or breakdown into this beautiful expression of the gift that they have to give. And you see it. You can see the audience. They are crying, they're clapping, they're celebrating, and they're not doing it for the gift. The gift is a extra piece. They're doing it because their heart is opening, because the person's heart is opening.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? And you can feel it when somebody is being vulnerable. And then also, I fully believe everything that you just said. And then also sometimes when someone is, this doesn't happen as often as it used to, but it still sometimes happens. Sometimes when someone is vulnerable, if you're not ready to be vulnerable, a wall can go up. You can be like, oh, fuck, you're like, I don't know what that is exactly. Maybe you're not, obviously there's a part of it not being ready, and there's some fear component to it. Because there's obviously many a reason why you're just not ready. Which is fine, but it's like there's definitely, as what you said, no, there's definitely, I can definitely feel when someone's been vulnerable in instances like you've mentioned, when you just like, you're fully open and the heart's open, you're just like, oh, you want to cry and all this kind of stuff. And then there's other times where you're not, for whatever reason, sort of.
And that's a reflection of you, right? That's a reflection, what I would say to that person in that moment. And I've been there plenty of times, right? When you see someone being vulnerable and in that vulnerability, you feel closed off to it. That's not a reflection of them. That's a reflection of you, right? That's a beautiful gift now that you're still given by the person, but now this is the opposite end of the scale. It's a beautiful gift showing you, oh, this is a heart wall that you have to bring attention to, right? How can you, I often describe the heart as a flower, as a lotus flower, and it has many different petals that can help it open.
Yeah.
So what pedal, what spiritual practice, what spiritual foundation can you learn to open that heart, to bring that wall down?
Mm. Yep. And therein lies the opportunity, doesn't it? They are everywhere. No matter which way we look, inward, outward, left, right, up, down. Just takes only a small amount of less awareness than I think people probably realize, and then also a fair amount of courage to do something with it, which is not always easy, but it's exactly what we're talking about. I wrote this down yesterday after listening to one of your podcasts, and it's just a question that come to mind. But everybody's on their own spiritual journey, whether we know it or believe it. We are exactly where we are meant to be, but sometimes we forget this fact and get a little lost. How do you like to remind people?
How do I like to remind people of that truth, of that spiritual truth?
Yeah.
One of the ways is that unconditional, loving space inside of us, that love that we're made of, right? I've noticed when I'm on that limiting belief of I need to be something more, right? Or my path isn't going fast enough, or my path, I look at someone else, I compare myself, and I think, oh, I need to be where that person is rather than where I am right now. Often that's because I have an actual deep-seated fear that if I don't do enough things within the time that I've been given, I will get to the end of this journey and I will be persecuted, or there'll be some entity there with a checkbox and a pad saying I did it wrong,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be marked wrong or right. And so it's one, bringing awareness to this root, deep seated belief that most of us have.
Yeah.
And two, it's asking ourselves the honest question: is that actually true? Is that actually the greatest reality? Because whenever I've asked myself that question and I've dropped into my heart to ask it, I get a firm no, right?
Yeah.
I get a firm remembering, understanding that if my higher power is love, it's unconditional in nature.
Yeah.
So what that means applied to this journey and this question of, am I at the right place at the right time? What that means is there's nothing I can do that's wrong, right? Whatever choices I make are my beautiful choices to make. And there's nothing outside of me that will ever judge me wrong or right unless I give that thing the power to do so.
Yeah. Beautiful, brother. That was a great answer. I must have known you were going to give a great answer when I wrote that down. Hey?
Tuning in.
Yeah, I fully feel what you're saying. Like when we get to the root of it, often those things those fears and stuff that we tell ourselves that they're just not true. We kind of know that. To get there, do you often find it's a series of, again, without trying to overthink it, how are you getting to that deep-seated belief? Like, is it a why type situation, or do you personally just find you just sit down and wait for that to come?
So I used to do the mental questioning that I just described, and it works for people. That's why I offer it, because along this journey from head to heart, we're all at different layers, right? So it's sometimes best to start with mental steps. Like, it's a lot of Byron Katie's work is centered around this, right? Is it true? Is it actually true, right? That works. It helps us break free of that belief system.
Yeah.
But what I do now more often that helps me get to that understanding of the unconditional reality is I drop into meditation and I don't do anything. I just open my heart, and there's many different practices, but just to describe it simply, I allow myself to hold myself, right? I fall back into the beingness of what I am, and in that beingness is that same answer.
Nice, man. I like that a lot. Drop in, don't do anything.
Yeah,
It's
because
it's
it's
another it's another
it's another
simple one because it's so
yeah.
hard, isn't it?
It's hard because if you're like me, we're so used to doing the things, right? We're so
Yeah,
used to being in a mask. You spoke about this earlier, right? The masculinized. I can only get value, or I can only get an answer if I'm doing something. And
yeah,
yes, we get many answers by doing, but we also get just as much from not doing, from just sitting in stillness.
yeah, yeah. True, and not always easy. Though I do fully agree with um with with getting there by just dropping in and not putting the pressure on yourself to need to do something. It's a tricky little one. Though I do people that have experienced it sort of know what it is, and people that haven't, I do suggest just giving it a go because I we probably both know that when you really do it, you know what we're talking about. It's not something you can tell yourself anything other than what it actually is because it's pretty deep. Um, I I'm interested. I was at a funeral yesterday, and the question came up in my own mind, and I haven't truly fully answered it myself yet, and I'm gonna sit with it today. But I'm interested. What do you want to be remembered for, Harrison?
Ooh, I don't think I've ever been asked that question. Hmm. I feel the thing that comes up when you ask that question is how I've made people feel, how
Yeah,
I've been able to create a container, a space, a conversation, a frequency and energy, all the same name,
yeah,
how I've been able to make that environment or that terrain to help someone feel.
mm,
And when I say feel, it doesn't need to look like anything. It just needs to feel.
yeah. Nice answer. I might have to stick with that, bro. I'm sorry. No, I'm joking. No, it's a good answer, man. Because you're so right. Like I can tell you the way how this interaction has been. I feel very expanded and very motivated. And to be honest, I was feeling pretty under the weather this morning. Have been fighting the old seasonal cold, but yeah, I can tell you're doing a good job. If you need feedback, I'm telling you, you're on the way. So keep
Thank
it
you,
up, bro.
Mitchell. I receive
No,
it. And well, to throw you some love back, I often refer to this phenomena as, a two-way channel. It's a two-way channel. So if you're feeling the love, my friend, it means I'm feeling the love too, right? It's that example that we gave before, right? This is of what you're feeling right now is a practical expression of what we were describing about needing other people in our life, right?
mm,
Needing other people in our world often because we're maybe stuck in something.
yeah,
We need that person to help us remember to feel, right? To feel
yeah,
the deeper states that we are.
yeah. Mm, thanks, man. Yeah, it's been a great podcast. I mean, if anyone can feel and get a tenth or feel the energy, a tenth of how I'm feeling now out of listening to it, then we've done our job. In my opinion, anyway. So I appreciate you. Yeah, I appreciate the two-way communication because the
Yeah.
channel's been it's been a lot of fun, man. So thanks again. The only common question I like to ask people at the end is, what does the present moment mean to you?
Mm. It's the only it's the only space that truly exists.
Mm,
And I've heard other people answer that question with the same answer,
yeah,
like respond in the same way, but I actually want to add a little bit of nuance to it. When I say that, it doesn't mean I am bypassing and ignoring either my quote unquote past pieces of me that still need support and nourishment. And it also doesn't mean I'm not planning and setting goals for my manifestations in the future. But what it does mean is that I know at the deepest of levels that whether it's the future manifestations or the past pieces in pain, how I will be interacting with all of those is in this present moment. How I will be either soothing my past pain or manifesting the greatest reality that I deserve to step into. It'll always be done now, right? It'll always be done in this moment. So practically, if I can cultivate presence, and I say presence not just as in referring to the present moment time, but presence as in expressing the fullest version of me in this moment, then that's how I get to my answers, right? Whether it's future related or past related.
Solid, man. No, interested to listen to that one again because it's hitting home. I feel it. Yeah. All right, brother. Appreciate everything. Everything you've done, and time and your energy. But let people know. I'll show note it. But let people know where they can find you, please.
Well, just before we finish, Mitchell, I just want to give you love. I know we spoke about it a second ago, but when I was also moving through my own shadows and shit this morning and yesterday, and your beautiful energy today has allowed me to, connect back into my frequency and my space. So I honor you and your show and the space you create. So thank you for having me. If people want to find out more about what I'm doing in this world, there are a couple of options. I have my own beautiful podcast, The Cosmic Love Antenna, where you can go deep into many of these topics that we've talked about today, with what Mitchell has been asking and posing. I also do coaching and mentoring. You can find out more about that by going to my website, harrisonmar.com. And then if you want a very sort of summarized / practical way to start implementing more of these tips and spiritual love practices, I'd recommend you check out my book, Your Cosmic Love Antenna, which is on Amazon. Just search it up and you'll find it. So thanks for having me, Mitchell.
No worries, man. Appreciate your appreciation. Your book, not an audio book yet?
Not yet, but I'm currently, after this recording, I have to go start adding some more recordings to that. So I'm working on it.
Oh, you are working on it. Awesome. Yeah, cool, man. I don't know what made me ask that. I love audiobooks. I mean, I love reading, but I also love audiobooks just because
Me too.
Driving and stuff like that. And it's always so awesome listening to an audiobook that is spoken from the.
Yeah.
I love it. It's super fun. All right, brother. Thank you again for all your time.
Love you, my friend. Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna with me, your host, Harrison. If you gained value or this episode hit your heart, please remember to share this out with a friend, a family member, or a lover. You can also leave your love over on Apple reviews and Spotify star feedback, and this helps me spread my frequency to more souls in need. Finally, if you want to connect with me deeper, want to reach out, interested in coaching, please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Harrison Mar, Mar spelled MEAGHER. Sending you so much love.
Have you ever wondered what actually happens in Congress every day? Stay informed on Capitol Hill's daily happenings with a concise, factual summary of the Senate and House of Representatives' activities from the previous session, free from bias, on the Congressional Record Daily Digest podcast. Subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and discover the process from the heart of U.S. politics. The Congressional Record Daily Digest, an Electricast production.
Electricast. Electricast.
Welcome to the Candle Power Hour.
Come with us backstage, behind the scenes of show business spanning over 4 decades and bringing you the experiences that can only be told by the people who were there.
Our guests are from the A-list, the F-list, and everyone in between. Get set for some of the most insane, hilarious, and inspiring stories you will ever hear.
I'm Mercury.
And I'm Diego.
Your host for
The Candle Power Hour.
Electricast.